We've got a very American topic today. Fat. Okay, more specifically, fat in relation to liposuction. And even more specific to that, having liposuction, does that make you gain weight in the place of the liposuction? Or does it make you gain weight other places? Does it? That's a good question, especially if you're planning on having any. I'm Katie Allen, and I've been a physician assistant in plastic surgery for over 15 years, working in and out of the OR. And we are going to use today's podcast to address exactly this. Does liposuction make you gain weight? Does it? Am I going to gain weight in another area? Am I going to gain weight other places? Am I going to get fatter because I chose to remove fat? That's a great question. And we're going to try to answer that question today. So, does liposuction cause me to gain weight? And if it doesn't cause me to gain weight, then who the hell started that rumor? We're going to talk about the methodology of liposuction. But first, we're going to talk about those fat cells and what happens to them with weight gain and weight loss. There are many different theories related to this. So we're just going to focus on the primary theories, the ones that we hear the most. In general, the number of fat cells are thought to be gained until we're about a toddler, likely to continue the gain of the number of fat cells in our body until adolescence. This might be partly based on genetics, but a lot of things might also be on lifestyle between birth to adolescence. Thanks, Mom. So when I was growing up, a little side note. When I was growing up, my mom wouldn't let me have any cereal, my brother or I, have any cereal that contained sugar as the first ingredient. Now, I haven't looked at any boxes lately, but at that time, that was like 3. There were a lot of things that my mom did not allow us to have. I don't know about you guys, but the first night of Halloween, we were allowed multiple pieces of candy, but then you could have like 2 pieces of candy a night tops, until that candy might have worn off. But there was a lot of restrictions from my mom growing up, which I want to thank her for right now, because those things probably helped me in not increasing the number of fat cells till adolescence, because she was dang strict. Love you, Mom. Thank you for it every day. The other thing that we know is maybe there's a possibility that we gain those fat cells, the number of fat cells until adolescence. There's a question of whether or not we gain cells during pregnancy, because there's those hormonal shifts and significant weight gain. And another question, whether or not you gain the number of fat cells, is with significant weight gains, greater than 10% of the body weight. So those things are just addressing the numbers. But usually when you and I are talking about gaining and losing weight, we're not actually talking about gaining and losing the number of fat cells, but instead we're talking about whether or not the fat cells that we already have are shrinking or are growing in size. Kind of crazy when you think about it, isn't it? Think about that water retention with those carbs, guys. But that's for a different day. All right, we have one more generalization for the sake of visualization. Try to say that real fast. So now let's talk about the location of the fat in most of the body. It's between the layers of the skin and the muscle. And a lot of your important structures lie in the abdominal area beneath the muscle. So let's just take a little opportunity. Pinch up on the abdominal tissue. Come on, go ahead. Pinch up for me, because even if you're skinny, you got some. Okay, when you're pulling up, you're basically pulling up on skin and fat. And what lies underneath that is muscle. And what lies underneath that muscle is all those important structures that we think about, like organs. And what protects the organs is even more fat. And we call that visceral fat. We can't get to that by liposuction. That visceral fat is kind of like your airbags, your bubble wrap. We can't get to that fat by liposuction. That's really affected more by diet and exercise. Again, you should have a small amount of that to protect the organs, but anything that's additional, you really got to get to by diet and exercise. You're going to have to put in that kind of work for that. Liposuction can't get down underneath that muscle. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the methodology of liposuction before we get to the original question, which was, does the liposuction make us gain weight anyway? Okay, so liposuction itself can be done with somebody awake or asleep, depending on the preference of the patient, also the location, and the amount that we're planning to remove. Okay, so for liposuction itself, a tiny little incision is made, kind of like a bug bite is what it looks like later. And since we live in the South, I guess that would hide kind of easily. But in general, a tiny little incision is made. Then we use a blunt tip type small cannula that is inserted into that incision, that is first utilized to infiltrate, is the fancy word for basically saying place in some type of solution. And that can be mixed up in a variety of different ways. That solution is determined by the surgeon or provider. After that tissue has been infiltrated with the solution, that cannula is then removed, and then a new cannula is then inserted into that small little bug bite type incision. We're going to describe classic liposuction. There are many varieties, but in this case, classic liposuction is where then that cannula is moved back and forth to break up some of the fat first, and then it is used to suction out through those small holes, and that cannula hooks up to a tubing, which hooks into a suction device, which pulls with a force to extract that fat out that has been broken up. This is most commonly and best utilized in an area which is a problem area, pocket of fat. Maybe that's the lateral thigh, the medial knee. It can be big areas or small areas, but often and best utilized with the best result in pockets of fat. So it's going to break it up. It's going to suction it out. And once those fat cells are gone, it is gone. Now, this does not address skin, but that is for a different podcast. So this goes back to those number of fat cells that we talked about earlier. Once the number of fat cells is removed, it's gone. They're not really going to come back. You might gain a little bit with an injury because maybe there's a small replacement. But in general, once those have been removed from that area, they're not coming back. So if you gain a substantial amount of weight, wherever the fat cells are located in the body that still remain, those are going to expand. So let's say we're going to go after the problem area, which is most common in liposuction, that you're going to choose that area that we're going to treat because that's been bothering you. That's the unfair area. In general, liposuction is best utilized and most appreciated in the area that is just unfavorable or genetics were not nice to you. It's not a weight loss tool. So if you see somebody later that you see has decreased in size, it doesn't decrease the size of the bones, so it's not going to decrease their weight. If they look like they lost weight overall on their whole body composition, then they actually lost weight. All right, so now we're going to go back to that original question. Does liposuction make you gain weight? Because that would suck. If we were to remove a large portion of fat cells from, let's say, your tummy, and let's say we did a good job, then wherever the fat cells remain, as you gain a substantial amount of weight, then you're going to see a increase in that bulk of whatever remains. Maybe that's the arms, maybe that's the leg, maybe that's a combination of the two, but probably not as much in the area which we've already removed those fat cells. So probably not as much in the tummy area, but you might see more of a gain in the areas where there's a substantial amount of fat cells still remaining. So in the past, that would have been an expansion of the tummy and the other locations more evenly. But now, because we don't have as many fat cells in the abdominal area, maybe now you're going to see a more substantial weight gain just in the other areas. So as a whole, liposuction by itself does not make you gain weight. Not really. But we're humans and we're Americans and we do silly things and we have a lot of food very accessible to us. The other thing that I see where liposuction doesn't make us gain weight, but where folks can gain weight after a procedure, is that oftentimes we're liposuctioning the area that is problematic to that person. It's the area that bothers them the most. Maybe it's the tummy area or the medial thigh. So if we go and remove those fat cells and afterwards that patient is feeling good about themselves, maybe they go out, they have an extra meal, and in general in the past their clothing would have gotten tight in that area that was problematic and it would have told them to, oh, that's getting a little tight, let's cut back on the area. Now they don't have that area to tell them to cut back. The other surrounding areas might be getting tight, but again, their brains don't say, hey, I should cut back on the tummy area. And so instead, they begin to maybe eat a little bit more, go out a little bit more, drink a little bit more before their brains tell them to cut back, because it takes a while before those pants are getting tight. So instead of a 5-pound weight gain that tells them to cut back, now they might have a 15 to a 20-pound weight gain before those pants get tight and tell them, hey, you should cut back on those calories. I warn patients about this. I say, go enjoy yourself, maybe 1 or 2 weekends, have a celebratory time that you feel and look your best. But in order to maintain that feeling of looking and feeling your best, you can't drink a lot. That is a lot of calories. You can't eat a lot. That is a lot of calories. This is a time to still maintain what you were trying to maintain before. After all, you've paid for it. You've also gone through the discomfort of it. So I want you to stay pleased with your results. So if somebody gains weight afterwards because of that celebratory time getting a little out of hand, that is not the fault of liposuction. That is the fault of your inability to control your caloric intake. And maybe the fact that you're unable to go and exercise at the rate that you normally would have. So it kind of takes a catch-up zone on that part too. We usually will not allow somebody to exercise at their typical rate for at least 4 weeks, and then there's some soreness. So maybe it's about 3 months maybe. So you're looking at 8 to 12 weeks before people are back to their regular exercise routine. So as long as you don't increase your caloric intake and then you get back to your exercise routine, I have never seen a problem. There is almost always a reasoning as to why there is weight gain after liposuction, and it is not liposuction's fault. It's really just a mathematical equation based on caloric input versus energy expenditures with exercise and other calorie burning type activities. And I just warn folks in advance, and they typically do quite well. You can even treat yourself to something here or there afterwards. There's no problem. Just don't let it get out of hand. It hasn't made you superhuman. Overall, I feel that if my patients utilize my guidance, there's no really reason to gain weight. And I really haven't seen that as long as somebody's kind of following instructions. With a warning in advance, folks really do quite well. They get back to their typical exercise routines within weeks. I don't want anybody to have severe caloric restrictions after surgery either, because we need the good nutrition in order to heal. But again, as long as you're following kind of the standard that you would have in advance if that was healthy habits, then folks are fine. You know, your goal is really looking at about 3 months, in my opinion, after surgery, because there's inflammatory changes. In fact, don't get on the scale right afterwards, because with inflammatory changes, you can actually see about a 5-pound weight gain. So just don't do it. And in general, I say follow my instructions. I don't want you to starve, because we need that nutrition for healing. But I don't want you to start to binge either. Binging wouldn't have helped you before, and it's not going to help you now. You've now spent money. You've had downtime with soreness. So let's make sure that we mitigate those risks for weight gain, which again, typically, if you have weight gain after liposuction, in general, it's just your fault. So we're going to go back to that original question. Again, does liposuction make you gain weight? No, I do not see liposuction in itself ever making people gain weight. It is best utilized for those problematic areas where diet and lifestyle changes overall, like exercise, do not really go after those pocket areas very well. They were basically made for a nomadic time where we needed those fat pockets in order to utilize energy, in order to get through a daily life. But now most of us are in an industrialized society, and I wish we could tell our bodies that so that they would stop storing some of that fat. Overall, even those problem zones, I want to say, hey, let's be confident and reassured with ourselves. But hell, if you can afford it and you have some downtime, let's go ahead and take care of those problem zones. After all, I love celebrating with our patients when they have been unblessed, let's say, with those problem zones. Just taking care of the thing that was bothering their minds. It's just a celebration. They can move on. Let's get on with life. And any time that I can say good riddance to fat, well, dang it, it always makes me happy. And in the future, we're going to also dabble and talk a little bit about cool sculpting versus liposuction, recovery time for that. What areas does it work best on? Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Please take the time to download and subscribe to this podcast, as that really does help me, and I don't mind to tell you that. A comment or two is always helpful as well. I'm also located at Make Me Pretty Podcast on Instagram, and you can follow me there, and I do appreciate it again in advance. I look forward to meeting and greeting you on future podcasts. And again, thank you so much to all my friends, family, followers, and everyone else for taking the time to listen to me and contribute to my support. Thank you.